Vin Diesel has been saying the 11th Fast and Furious movie will be different, more like an American road trip with some unexpected artistic touches. Fast 11 is meant to be the second half of the franchise's big two-part finale, picking up right where Fast X left off. That movie introduced Jason Momoa's Dante as the new villain and ended on a massive cliffhanger, setting this one up as a direct continuation rather than a new chapter. When we last saw them, Dom and his son Brian were caught in a dam explosion triggered by Dante. Roman Han and Ramsey's plane had literally been blown out of the sky. Letty and Cypher somehow ended up stranded in Antarctica, where they ran into Giselle, miraculously back from the dead after her supposed death in Fast and Furious 6. And to make things even wilder, Luke Hobbs made a surprise post-credit return, despite his long-standing feud with Diesel. The crew's scattered across the globe, and the road ahead is all about finding their way back to each other. But production on the next Fast and Furious has slammed into a red light. The script still isn't finished, and the budget's already overshooting the studio's limits by around $50 million. Universal's reportedly trying to cut about $140 million compared to the last movie's costs. Jason Momoa says he hasn't even seen a script, several cast members haven't signed on yet, and that release window Vin Diesel once hinted at, nowhere to be found. With box office numbers slipping across the franchise, the road to the grand finale is looking rough. Still, right after Fast X hit theaters, Universal confirmed its sequel was officially in the works. Around the same time, they also announced a Hobbs & Shaw sequel, but that one's been stuck in development limbo ever since. On top of that, there are whispers of yet another spin-off in early development. So while Diesel keeps promising the end is near, nobody really knows how many Fast and Furious movies we'll actually get. The franchise has gone from underground street races to launching muscle cars into space, and it's still evolving. Originally, Fast 11 was supposed to wrap up the main saga, but Diesel later hinted the finale might stretch into a full trilogy. The only problem is, Fast X didn't exactly dominate the box office, pulling in $700 million worldwide against a massive $340 million budget. Still, Universal sees Fast and Furious as one of its crown jewels, and they're not about to let it stall out anytime soon. For now, both Fast 11 and Hobbs & Shaw 2 are officially on the road, but that's just the starting line. Vin Diesel says the producers want to wrap the main saga with 11, while Universal's parent company, Comcast, is reportedly pushing for a Fast 12 to keep the engines running a little longer. If that happens, expect smaller budgets, since the studio will want to tighten things up after the last two films didn't quite meet expectations. Diesel also made it clear he wants time to dive into the emotional reunion between Dom and Hobbs, a storyline that feels way too big for just one movie. Add Hobbs & Shaw 2 to the mix, and it's starting to look like we'll get at least 3 more Fast Saga projects before this ride finally reaches the finish line. And funny enough, those rumored budget cuts might actually be a blessing in disguise, forcing the franchise to refocus on what made it special in the first place: street racing, custom cars, and raw practical stunts instead of overblown billion-dollar chaos. Diesel seems dead set on bringing the series back to where it all started, on the streets. The problem is, Fast X ended with way too many cliffhangers to just hit the brakes and start fresh. With so many storylines left hanging, Fast 11 pretty much has to pick up right where things left off, which means we're not jumping straight back into a pure street racing movie anytime soon. And let's be honest, Toretto's crew stopped being simple racers years ago. They're international operatives now, saving the world with NOS and family values. Going back to basics sounds amazing, but it's not as simple as throwing in a couple of drag races and calling it old school. If they really want to recapture that early magic, the racing has to matter again. In the recent films, races have mostly been nostalgic callbacks or flashy side moments, like Dante's street race in Fast X, which was more about showing off how dangerous he is than actually driving the story forward. That's why the perfect final battle between Dom and Dante shouldn't just be another CGI-packed explosion fest. It should be a race. Imagine the stakes being life or death, not just for Dom, but for his entire crew. That would bring back the intensity, the adrenaline, and the emotional weight of the original films, while still feeling like a massive cinematic finale. And speaking of nostalgia, Devon Aoki, who played Suki in Too Fast, Too Furious, was recently spotted on set. If she's really returning, that's a big sign the franchise is leaning hard into its roots. More familiar faces, more street energy, it all points to Fast 11 trying to steer this saga back where it belongs, on the blacktop. This could also open the door for Letty and Han to each get their own race, giving them proper send-offs that actually fit their characters. Meanwhile, Hobbs & Shaw could handle the big explosive action scenes because, let's be honest, racing was never really really their thing. But as of now, nothing about the finale is locked in. Plans keep shifting constantly, not just for the main saga, but for all the spin-offs too. After Hobbs and Shaw pulled in over $750 million worldwide, Universal wasted no time announcing a sequel. Producer Hiram Garcia even confirmed talks had started back in 2019, but that project hit a wall thanks to The Rock and Jason Statham's packed schedules with other franchises. Later, Universal announced a solo Hobbs movie to bridge the gap between Fast X and Fast 11, with Dante threatening Hobbs in the post-credit scene as setup. But with Fast 11 running into production trouble, those solo projects are probably off the table. It'd only make the already tangled timeline even messier. So the studio switched gears back to Hobbs and Shaw 2, making sure it wouldn't interfere with the main saga. Garcia confirmed the pivot, but admitted progress has been slow. Dwayne Johnson, however, seems fully on board. He's called the sequel the definitive Hobbs story, something more emotional and grounded, even comparing it to Logan. That's a bold comparison, but it suggests this might be Hobbs's final mission. Whether he goes out in a blaze of glory or simply hangs up the badge remains to be seen. Then there's the long-rumored female-led spin-off, along with possible solo films for other fan-favorite characters. Things have been quiet on that front, but that doesn't mean they're dead. In fact, it's looking more and more likely Universal and Diesel will agree to split the finale into 2 films instead of 1. That would give them room to bring back nearly every major character in the franchise's history, and maybe even introduce a new heavy-hitter villain. Jason Momoa crushed it as Dante, but if they actually manage to land Keanu Reeves, who's been rumored for years and never flat-out denied it, it could take things to a whole new level. And of course there's Brian. Vin Diesel has never stopped teasing some kind of return for Paul Walker's character. Even though Brian's been kept in the background, his presence is still felt, whether it's Dom naming his son after him or the constant nods to his skyline. As the saga nears its end, it feels almost inevitable that Brian will somehow be part of the final act. Thanks to modern deepfakes and AI, they could make it happen, just like they did in Furious 7, but that's a risky move. Hollywood's track record with digital recreations is hit or miss, and when it misses, fans notice instantly. If Universal decides to bring Brian back in a big way, they'll need to handle it with absolute care and respect. At the end of the day, Fast Saga remains one of the most successful and longest-running franchises in movie history. With the kind of box office power it still has, there's no way Universal or the cast will just walk away. If the next few movies perform decently, don't be surprised if the saga keeps going. At this rate, Fast and Furious might even outlast Avatar in terms of sheer staying power. That said, the street racing DNA of the franchise can't be ignored. It's still part of what makes these movies fast and furious, even if it doesn't drive the story like it used to.